Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. We're going to get started here in just a few minutes. We're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Just want to make sure everybody can hear me. Okay, so my name is Sammy Bosacki. I'm one of the assistant directors in the Department of Campus Involvement, and I primarily work with the fraternities and sororities on campus and the student organizations. And we are going to be talking tonight about officer transitions. So first, we're just gonna start with leaving you guys with this quote, just really talking about why it's so important to be strong leaders all the way up until the transition from our current role into a new role, or maybe kind of handing over the torch to the next leadership team. So kind of talking through today's format of a webinar. This is being recorded and will be available on YouTube on this channel, SCSU Involvement, so that way you can have access to this throughout. And I do just want to explain that there is a chat function that's on the right side of your screen. This will allow you to type in questions as we go throughout the presentation. You will need to be logged in with a Google account in order to use that chat function. But that way, if you do have questions as we go along this presentation, I will be checking that and I can answer your questions as we go. Or I can also come back to them at the end so we can kind of make sure we answer any lingering thoughts or comments or questions that you have regarding this process. So right now I'm just going to go ahead and check to make sure we don't have anything. Looks good. So the overview of today is kind of just highlighting why do we transition? Why is it important? And why does it help organizations? We'll be covering some basics of transitioning, what that might look like and what is kind of included in that. Sharing of documents, helping understand what we want to share and how we want to share those documents with our incoming officers. Then additionally, money and finances. So really looking at how do we help our new officers understand the budgeting process of our organization, how to spend money, how to access and apply for additional funds if needed as well. We will highlight a few campus resources and things to keep in mind and information to pass along. Then we'll point out some of the transition materials that we have available for student organization leaders. And then finally, talking about an actual transition process and what that might look like for your outgoing officers and the incoming officers. And then, as I mentioned, we will have time for questions at the end. So feel free to put those in the chat as we go along so we can come back to those as well. So the first piece is transition. If you've ever heard of the saying, why reinvent the wheel, I think that's really applicable to officer transitions for student organizations, mainly because it's extremely frustrating if you've experienced this in your lifetime, kind of having to start fresh, start from the beginning, since you kind of weren't given anything to kind of go off of. So ideally, with a successful and healthy transition process, it would kind of look where the new officers would be given all the tools and the resources that they need so they can jump right in and kind of start exactly from where you left off. That would be an ideal situation. Of course, you know, there's little bumps and hiccups, but if we can really set them up to be successful, then the organization can continue and kind of start off from that legacy that you've left as the current officer of the organization. So these are kind of just some basic tips and information. So maybe, you know, you've kind of think that some of this might be common sense, but just kind of a good refresher for all officers that are currently in these roles. So first, a really great practice is to introduce new officers to your faculty and staff advisor. You know, we know that not all advisors are able to attend every meeting or every officer exec board meeting or events, and so this is really great to kind of bring in your advisor so that they can put faces to the names of all of the new people that you have starting in these roles. Making sure that you have a contact list for all of your officer and advisor. That way everyone has phone numbers and emails and can kind of keep in touch with everybody if they don't already know everyone on the board. So it's just a good practice, as well as the advisor, so they can contact any of the new officers as well. So as you know, registering your student organization is an annual process every fall. So making sure that your roster is updated and kind of that information is communicated so the new officers are not caught off guard when they hear about registration, and kind of giving them a heads up that this does happen each year for our groups at St. Cloud State. And additionally, as you go throughout the year, if you have any new officers or maybe a position holder changed, it's really helpful to make sure that your roster on Huskies Connect is updated throughout the year so that they can receive important information, and that so that when students are maybe interested in joining your organization, they are contacting the correct people. So it's also really good to kind of make sure that you're giving access and instructions to any of the tools that you use in running your organization. So Huskies Connect, making sure that they have access to that so they can go in and edit and update that information. Any organization emails, whether that be through St. Cloud State or maybe a third party, making sure they have the login information and kind of keeping them up to speed with what's included in that. Social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, whatever you use for your organization, making sure that they have that information. If you have a website or blog, maybe even kind of talking them through how it works or what functions you use it for, or best practices, things like that. Online document storage, so if you do have a place where you store your documents for your organization, making sure that's updated and refreshed with any of the new pieces that you've been working on as well. If you're a nationally affiliated organization, making sure that the officers have access to maybe any website login information that you have, or just making sure that they're familiar that that is something that your organization is required to work on and work through. Just a kind of another maybe tip or trick that you can help incoming officers with is just a reminder to check email so that they can stay updated with what's going on and to be in contact with people in their organization. If it's not email that you use typically with your organization, maybe you have a group text or you use some other type of communication app or Facebook, that's really good to make sure everyone's on the same page in how you communicate so that everyone is kept in the loop and kind of kept in good communication so that you can be a successful or functioning organization. Student org lockers. If your student organization has a locker in Atwood Memorial Center through the Department of Campus Involvement, making sure that the new officers have the combination and the locker number. If you are not sure what your locker combination is, you can always stop by the front desk of the Department of Campus Involvement and we can help you get that information. If you reserve rooms on campus for meeting spaces or events, kind of talk the new officers through how that process works if they are not familiar with that. Any rooms on campus can be found at stcloudstate.edu/scheduling. This is where you go to reserve rooms and, like I said, maybe even kind of walking the new officers through that process if they've never done it before. If you are nationally affiliated with an organization, even talking through what that relationship looks like with the contacts that you work with, making sure the national or international contacts know who the new officers are, and kind of talking through maybe what that communication style looks like, or maybe reports that need to be filed, just to make sure that everyone's on that same page. And then also finish any correspondence that you can. So if you're in the middle of certain projects or if there's events coming up, kind of finish up and tie up any loose ends. And then if you have pending items or pieces that are in progress, making sure that that's communicated as to where you left off so that, like I said, they can kind of pick up and start from that point. So sharing documents is one of the key pieces to a successful transition. And I always recommend to have a digital copy of documents as well as hard copies. It's kind of nice to have all of your documents, important documents, all in one place, maybe in a folder or in a 3-ring binder, and that way you can kind of hand that right all over to the new officer so they have something to look back through if they have questions. But then it's also helpful to have the digital copies of these forms or documents so that if things need to be edited or updated, they have access to that as well. A lot of times I've seen organizations use flash drives or, cloud storage or anything like that. Huskies Connect does have a document storage capability, so something to keep in mind, and nothing will get lost and nothing can be kind of locked out on Huskies Connect as well. Other documents that are important to keep record of and provide access to new officers would be Constitution and bylaws. So printing out the most updated version of that document as well as making sure that that's saved in a safe place so it can be easily accessed and referenced. Meeting minutes and agendas. Additionally, this is a really great piece of record keeping for your organization as well as for new officers to look back and see maybe when something passed or when something was voted on. So really good pieces to kind of keep in a place that's safe and can be accessed by officers at any time. If you keep evaluations from programs or events, that's really good to pass along to new officers. So again, they can kind of look back and see what worked at events, maybe what didn't work so well, and they can make adjustments from that. But those are good pieces of reference as well. If you keep a calendar of events, that would be really helpful to pass along because they can then look back and see when events happened, to make sure if they want to kind of keep it at that same time, they can plan ahead as well. And if you have events that are already planned for the future, kind of making sure that they know when those are and kind of where those events are planned or in the planning process so they can follow up and make sure that that happens successfully. Additionally, if you have officer position descriptions that maybe are not in your constitution or bylaws, keeping that document around as well so that officers can reflect and make sure that they are fulfilling the duties of their role. So for finances, a couple of things to kind of keep in mind as you're talking with officers about this process. And I think finances is important for all officers to know and not just the treasurer or not just the president. I think this is really good practice for all officers and a good thing to kind of talk about as an organization. So knowing or providing the information to new officers about where your organization receives money. Is that from dues collection? How are dues collected? How much are they? Does your organization receive funding from the Senate Finance Committee and helping them through that? Does your organization have any fundraising events already planned? Or have you ever hosted them in the past? Or is that something maybe that they want to try? And then where can they find information about fundraising? Passing along organization account information. So if your organization has a 900 and or a 334 account, helping them process money, and understanding what those accounts look like, and maybe how much is in those accounts so they know going forward. If your organization has a formalized budget approval process, making sure that they understand what that looks like. If you have a working budget document, that's good to pass along so they understand where the money is allocated. And then just kind of if your organization has a process for managing that money, just explaining that so they're familiar. Additionally, if you have any documents from past student org funding applications or approved budgets or any pending payments that haven't been finalized yet, making sure that all of that is communicated as well. So here are some campus resources that would be helpful to make sure that the new officers understand, so that way they can kind of keep an eye out for them or get in contact with the area, whether it's a department or organization, to make sure that they have this information. So DCI is the Department of Campus Involvement. As I mentioned, we are a resource for student organizations, so great place to come ask questions, especially if these new officers kind of get stuck in the process of something. We can try to help as best as possible. The registration process, which I talked through, is hosted through the Department of Campus Involvement and is required each fall. So keeping that on students' new officers' radar is very helpful. The Senate Finance Committee, making sure they understand what that is and how they can get information about it, especially if they're interested in applying for money. That information is on our website. You can see there is stcloudstate.edu/campus involvement, student orgs, budget, and finance. Okay, let's see, trainings. You can check any upcoming trainings through the Department of Campus Involvement's website. Main Street and Side Street are the student involvement fairs. These are really helpful in helping to promote your organization and events and programs that you have coming up. They take place at the beginning of each semester, so keeping an eye out for that if you're interested. The eBlast is an electronic biweekly newsletter. This is sent by the student organization staff to all presidents, vice presidents, and treasurers. So really good information in that newsletter with events that are coming up, policy updates, or important information that is relevant to student organization leaders. Storage space. So if your organization has storage space or is looking for more, come talk to us as well. So transition materials. We have a couple of transition material outlines and helpful documents on our website. A couple of the things listed here is a student organization transition guide. This is a really helpful PDF that has a full checklist of things to keep in mind, a kind of overviewing what we've talked about in this webinar, as well as goal setting documents to help facilitate that transition between the outgoing officer and the incoming one. So a really helpful document that's a good practice for all officers to work through. And then, of course, the Student Organization Guidebook outlines all of the procedures and policies and really everything that you need to know regarding your student organization, all in one document. So a really great resource to show students where that's at. It's also located on the Student Organization website. And of course, if you have a transition binder and any online documents, kind of keeping those all together and handing them over. So now once you've kind of covered all of that, you've reviewed a lot of this information, or as the current officer, you've reflected on what that looks like for you, it's really helpful to plan out what a transition might look like. Some organizations have a more formalized transition process, whereas others might just have a quick kind of touch base, here's the information, and go. It's really up to your organization and what you feel works best for the work that you're doing. So, of course, preparing those worksheets that we talked about, the Officer Transition Guide, and any other documentation that might be helpful in preparing the officers. Goal setting, so having both officers, the incoming and the outgoing, sitting down and talking about goals and how to work through those and how to be successful as an organization and kind of working together in that process. And then maybe even hosting an officer transition retreat or a workshop. This, I believe, is probably one of the best and most successful ways to wrap up a transition process for a student organization. And so whether that's a weekend-long retreat or maybe just a dinner or a couple hours where all of the outgoing officers and the incoming officers and advisors can be together and work through that transition so that there is dedicated time to ensuring that the information is communicated and given over. And so, like I said, it can maybe be a day-long retreat or maybe just a few hours to kind of make sure that that information is talked through. So one of the really great pieces about facilitating a workshop, an officer transition workshop, is some questions to help prompt those conversations. So we posted a few questions here that would be really good for the outgoing officer to reflect on. So that way they can kind of give this to the new officer and kind of help guide them in their role. Or really great questions that you can use when you're in your transition workshop that you can talk to the incoming officer about. So what you liked most about your position, maybe difficult decisions that you didn't anticipate you would have to work through. What maybe it would have been easier to help you, if you would have known this, it would have been easier for you to be the president or to be the treasurer. Maybe some difficult pieces that came up or some barriers that you had in your role and how you overcame those and maybe how to prevent those if it's something that you're able to prevent in the future, and kind of things you wish you would have known that would have been helpful for you. And then for incoming officers, so these are things that help the incoming officer really start off on a good foot and kind of generate ideas and kind of help the organization and guide the organization in the direction that they want to go. And so, kind of talking about goals and what that position might look like for you, what you would like to gain out of that experience, and what you want to bring to the organization as this new officer coming in. And then, of course, right there on the bottom, we have a couple of questions that are really great for incoming officers to ask of the outgoing officers. So, if you're transitioning in May and you have the summertime to process and work on things, you can ask what are things you should be working on immediately. Or if you're transitioning now, going into the winter break or the fall break, these couple weeks that we have over the holidays, really, what are things that you can work on to kind of get a jump start into the spring semester. Additionally, I really like this question about people that you should get to know. So are there people on campus that have been really, really helpful to you? Are there people that have been longtime supporters of your organization? Who are those people, and how can the incoming officers continue to build those relationships? And services that I need to know about. If your organization has an awesome partnership with maybe a company in town that you do a fundraiser with, making sure that those officers know about that. Or if there's other services on campus that you have found to be really helpful, just, ensuring that they are kept in the loop about those things. I want to kind of, as we wrap up this presentation here, I just want to kind of reiterate the importance of transitioning and how that is beneficial not only to the outgoing officers to kind of pass along their wisdom, but for the incoming officers to really kind of then take that information, like I said, and kind of start off on a really positive note and kind of continue that legacy that you all have left as the outgoing executive board. So on that note, we do have a few upcoming trainings. Next week, we have 2 recruitment trainings. So of course, those are just 2 different dates and times, but really great information about gaining more membership and kind of keeping your members engaged in your organization. And on the 16th, we'll be hosting an officer transition workshop on campus. So, if you weren't able to attend tonight, or if you have other officers that would be interested, they can come to that presentation as well. Then additionally, all of the training information, location, any of the updates are on Huskies Connect, huskiesconnect.stcloudstate.edu/events. So now we have time for questions. So if you do have any questions right now, as I mentioned, you can type them in the chat. On the right-hand side, you'll see that chat function. You will need to be logged into a Google account in order to access that. But if you do have any questions, feel free to go ahead and put those in, and I can answer them. And if you don't have any questions right at this moment, my email address is listed on there. You can email us at any time, or you can give us a call or stop in to the Department of Campus Involvement, and we'd be happy to help you out. So I'm going to hang out here for just a minute, kind of see if anybody has any questions, and we will go from there. Thank you all so much again for coming tonight and for sharing in this information. And if you, like I said, if you have any other questions, let us know. Type them in the chat, and I'll wait around for just a few more.